What if I told you that the biggest threat to your customer experience isn't your competition, it's not even your tools, heck, it's not even AI. The biggest threat to the customer experience and your bottom line is your employee experience. So my name is JP Dumas, and this is this week's session of Confessions of a CX Executive. Now, I've spent more than 25 years leading customer experience teams, sales, and retention operations for some pretty big brands you may have heard of. We're talking billions of dollars, millions of dollars in the P&L responsibilities, and thousands of employees. But today I want to talk about an uncomfortable truth. You want to fix your customer experience, you got to start with your employee experience. See, it goes without saying that if your employees aren't engaged, they're not going to give 100% effort. And that's going to show up in your customer experience. So let's spend a little time digging into this. Not because it feels good, not because it's the right thing to do, but because of the impact it has on the bottom line. And if you're truly interested in transforming your business and making sure that every dollar counts, then take this ride with me. I'll talk about the 5 things that'll make your business more successful. So what's the biggest mistake that companies make with regards to the customer experience? Well, I'll tell you a little bit from my experiences. The first is they work on fixing the customer without focusing on the people who are actually servicing the customer. So what do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. I walked into a business once. It was one that I was running, just hired for, and we had some crazy targets. We had some antiquated tools. But here was the biggest issue. Employees weren't being coached properly and more or less being threatened to achieve pretty high sales results. And so when I took a look at this environment, I said, well, let's pump the brakes for a second. I conducted focus groups with the teams. I met with the leaders, and then we started to map out some of the issues that were holding the teams back. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some tools challenges there, which makes it very difficult to execute. And things that make it difficult for your employees are going to make it difficult for your customers. But I digress. The important piece I uncovered was that the teams weren't being heard. They'd raised these concerns, but they were just told to work harder. So you can guess where that went. So long and short, we conducted focus groups, we focused on improving tools, we elevated the coaching from our leaders, and we gave the agents the tools that they needed to not just have conversations, but to have deep conversations that would result in better sales performance. So what's the punchline here? Real simple. Over the next 60 days, as we rolled out this process, we saw sales conversion improve 20%. By the end of the year, we saw revenue improve 35%. And I rolled this out at a couple of sites. Here's the rub. These sites went from middle of the pack to number 1 and number 2 in the entire organization. Again, this happened within the course of a year. And yours truly, well, I was named Division Employee of the Year. Not bad for fixing a few scripts, listening to the folks, and telling them the why of what they do and why it's important. So how does team culture influence the brand, or how customers receive the brand? Well, got another story for you. This one involves our mobile product and a retention group. You know, customer retention, where customers are thinking about going to another provider and the last thing on their mind is spending more money with you. Well, guess what? We introduced mobile service wireless devices to a retention team and said, how are we going to get them to sell? Well, one of the things we found out right away is that we didn't do a very good job of explaining the why. And when you do that, the teams are somewhat disconnected. They don't understand why their job has to change. Why do they have to introduce this new product? So we had to do something totally radical here. So one of the first things we did is we had some agents who were experiencing a little bit of success. And so we made them ambassadors and said, well, what are you doing that's different? We had them play their calls for the team with their permission, of course. We had them conduct team huddles. We started to identify some of these best practices that would help our teams be successful. We also did something that was totally radical. We did daily sessions in which we said, whoever has the best call, submit it, because we all want to learn here. And that was something that got all of our teammates involved. And so when people feel like they're being heard, they will contribute. And now everyone's working on solving this problem. We also did something a little bit different. See, we had another team in another part of the country that was doing quite well with this project. So I said, had a couple of leaders who were up and coming, and they had the potential to go to the next level. So I deputized them and said, guess what? You are now a consultant. I want you to go to those other sites, and I want you to learn what it is that they do well. I want you to dig deep, ask the questions you want to ask, and then bring that back to your team. There's no shame here because ultimately we all win and we all get better. So again, empowering these team members to do that and graciously having a team member who was willing to share best practices along with all the other things we were doing, we brought that back to the group. And guess what? Within that year, we grew sales by 400%. Again, another example of why engaging your team has a great impact to the bottom line. So what are some signs that your team doesn't feel empowered to deliver great service? Man, I've got a few examples. There's an easy one that I often think about is if your team goes to lunch and they don't like to wear the company swag or they cover it up, probably a good indication that you might have a culture issue, just FYI. But I think the other thing that you tend to see is you see an increase in escalations, not because issues are difficult to solve, but there's no wherewithal to address some of those concerns. The other thing that you tend to see is everyone's very, very busy, but nothing's getting work done. And last but not least, people just stop giving you their suggestions. Had a situation like that. You knew a story was coming. We rolled out a new policy in retention in which we were very stringent on the type of discounts that we could give to a customer. And so we did have some team members who kind of took that and ran with it. We kind of lost the fight on empathy. We also had some newer agents who had some process opportunities in terms of learning the business, a two-pronged approach. We spent the next 60 to 90 days running a sprint to figure out how can we tackle these two problems simultaneously. So the first, we said the most basic, with our newer team members, let's understand from their perspective where they're struggling and what sort of tools, training, or information they would need to make them feel more comfortable and have the right type of conversations with customers. The second thing we did is for our more seasoned agents who were very tight on policy, but not necessarily on empathy, we talked about why it's important to leave that customer with a great experience. Whether they stayed with us or decided to choose another provider, the whole end-to-end experience was critical that we were able to execute. And more importantly, we rewarded those team members who demonstrated those behaviors of empathy. Those who got customer compliments, we recorded those, we put them on the wall, we posted all of those things that were critical to driving the right type of behavior. As you can imagine, we started to see things turn by involving our teams in the solution to these problems. At the end of the year, we saw a reduction in customer escalations of 37%. I repeat, 37%. Not bad for rolling up our sleeves and putting in a little bit of elbow grease to improve the customer experience. So can you share an experience where EX made a difference in CX? So where the employee experience made a huge difference in the customer experience? Well, got another story for you. So walked into another business where, again, we had some pretty tough sales targets and we had, again, some antiquated equipment. But here's the rub. We were just starting to put in a new program that we thought would address this, but we weren't quite getting traction on it. This program tackled 3 key areas in the business. As you can guess, the first involved training your frontline teams to have better interactions with customers. The second involved ensuring that teams receive the right type of coaching from their leaders. And then 3, as we onboarded new team members, we ensured that the platform skills of all of our sales trainers were world class. And so we took these 3 elements and created a brand new program. Now, we didn't stop there. In addition to that, I talked about that little tools challenge that we had. Well, we took our frontline teams and we involved them in the development of the tools revamp. So they told us everything from the color to the size of the fonts to how much white space needed to be on the page, all of those different things. And as we put this together, we began to roll this out first at our internal sites and then ultimately with some of our partner sites. Now, I'm going to fast forward and tell you what we saw here because this was incredible. We started to see this buzz build around the program as the first set of teams who went through this process started to see their conversion and performance improve. And when that happens, that also means that people are making a little bit more money. So that's an important piece there. So let me tell you the important thing that happened with this program. As we began to build a buzz across our various sites, there was this anticipation that the program would come to them because as they start to see other teams improve their conversion performance, it became must-see TV. Now, here's a more personal story. As we were overseas rolling out this program, We were hit with a terrible typhoon, and I'll tell you, it was touch and go for a minute, but we were able to make it back to our hotel safely, and we had to debate whether or not we were going to continue the training. Well, lo and behold, we did decide to finish the training, and we had team members who were also impacted by the storm show up at training. Why does that matter? We had more than 90% attendance by individuals who were personally impacted by the storm. And for me, that was a personal testament to the sort of culture and anticipation that we built, that people saw that it was that important to the business and they participated. It's one of the most moving stories I can think of in my career. What did this program do? Over 200 basis points improvement in conversion, and it gave $38 million back to the business. And that's not a typo, $38 million back to the business. We improved the processes, we engaged the people, and the performance followed. One of the highlights of my career. So what specific things can you do to improve the employee experience? I think there's a couple of things that you can do as a leader. The first question, though, is you should ask yourself, would you want to work for you? But most importantly is, listen at scale. Conduct those focus groups, listen to your customers. Those things are important. Number two, fix what's fixable. Doesn't have to be huge. Small wins matter. See, one of the things that we did is that we kept a running list of all the issues and challenges that our teams brought to us. And as we checked them off the list, we publicized it. And at the end of the year, we had a huge poster of all of our achievements so that they were visible. And most importantly, we acted on the feedback that we were given. So you spoke, we listened, we acted. And I think the most important thing, though, is explain to people why the business is organized the way it is. See, we're dealing with adults, and people will try a little bit harder if they understand how their efforts are going to contribute to the greater cause. It's real simple. We don't have to keep this hidden, because here's the most important thing that I've learned. If we can't make our people happy, how are they going to make the customers happy? And customers can tell when a team is disengaged. And when the customer sees that, they will take their dollars elsewhere. At the end of the day, tools don't talk to people, humans do. And in this world of AI, there's our teams that are going to be the differentiator. And this is why the customer experience matters so much. So again, AI is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting as we move forward, but it's humans who are going to be in that front line who are going to make such a difference when empathy and complex issues need to be resolved. So once again, let's lean into the employee experience and let's ensure that we have positive customer outcomes, because your bottom line depends on it. I want you to drop some comments below. Tell me about some experiences that you've had in driving an excellent customer experience for your people. Once again, my name is JP Dumas, and this has been this week's edition of Confessions of a CX Executive.